Good morning, church. Good morning. That was very loud, wasn't it? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Josh, and I'm one of the pastors of this wonderful church. I'm glad to be here this morning. Last week I had the cold, and I was struck down, so I was at home with the kids, and unfortunately this week Jess is feeling a bit run down, so she's at home with the kids as well this week, unfortunately. But I'm glad to be here this morning. This morning we're going to be looking at John chapter 1, and when we read John chapter 1, I'm going to ask Riley to come up, and he's going to read the passage for us.
Yeah. Before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Now when it was time for supper, the devil had already put into the heart of Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray him. Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands, that he had come from God and he was going back to God. So he got up from supper, laid aside his outer clothing, took a towel and tied it around himself. Next he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and to dry them with the towel tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who asked him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you don't realize now, but afterward you will understand." "You will never wash my feet," Peter said. Jesus replied, "If I don't wash you, you have no part with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." One who has bathed, Jesus told him, does not need to wash anything except his feet, but he is completely clean. You are clean, but not all of you. Or he knew who would betray him. This is why he said, "Not all of you are clean." When Jesus had washed their feet and put on his outer clothing, he reclined again and said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are speaking rightly, since that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done for you. Truly I tell you, a servant is not greater than his master, and a messenger is not greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them."
Thank you, Riley. That was awesome. A couple of weeks ago, I was trying to discern what I was going to do for this sermon, and I had Riley help me to discern from God what he wanted us to hear this morning, and we both came to the conclusion that God wanted us to do John chapter 13. So thank you, Riley, for helping me on that discerning process, and well read this morning. So here at Highfields Church of Christ, on any given Sunday, we have up to 30 people serving here. Others serve in the church, whether it's mowing the grass, doing gardens, looking after the maintenance of the building. We have those who lead home groups. We have those who go and visit the Crow's Nest homes where they sing and visit people. We have people in our church who, on a Wednesday, they go to the court and support those going through domestic violence as they go through court. Last year, when we had the Christmas carols on the lawn, we had 15 people turn up to help serve, and just as many people to help sit down. And I'm sure there are many, many more people who do other things in our community that we have no idea that they do. So this morning, that is why I want to ask us two questions. The first one is, why do we serve? And the second is, what is the point of serving? So the first one, why do we serve? When we come to the Gospel of John, which the passage is from what we read, the whole point of the Gospel of John is trying to make us understand who Jesus is. And throughout John's Gospel, he is repeatedly saying, Jesus is God. Jesus, you can read when Jesus says, I am. He says, John also says, Jesus is the Word who was with God and was God. Later on, Thomas says, Jesus, you are my Lord and my God. So throughout the whole of John's Gospel, we read that John is trying to say, Jesus, he is God. He is God. And then we come to chapter 13. And this same Jesus that John is saying, he is God, he is now getting it from the table, takes off his outer garment, he stoops down, grabs a towel, puts it around his waist, and washes the feet of the disciples. Foot washing in the culture back in the time of Jesus, it was one of the lowest and most humiliating household tasks to do. It was a kind of work that only servants or slaves do. Even some Jewish traditions said that this task was too low even for a Jewish slave. So they gave it to a Gentile, so someone who wasn't a Jew. It was almost considered the lowest of the low. It was too degrading for even a Jew to do. So imagine the scene. These men walking along dusty roads in sandals. Their feet are dirty from the dust, sweat and filth. The feet are unpleasant. He's doing an undignified work. And yet, Jesus, the Lord, our teacher, God, takes the towel. What I find so amazing about this passage is what John tells us before about Jesus, before he gets up and washes the disciples' feet. We can read in verses 1 to 3 where Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world to the Father. He knew that the Father had given him everything into his hands. He knew that he had come from God and that he was going back to God. Jesus knew that the authority that the Father had given him. So if anyone in that room deserved to be served and honoured, it was Jesus. But also we read in those 3 verses that Jesus also knew that Judas was going to betray him. Jesus knew exactly who it was. He knew the pain of betrayal that was about to come. But what does Jesus do? What does he do? He serves. He does not use his status to avoid service. He does not respond to betrayal and bitterness or revenge. He gets up from the meal, takes the towel, and washes the feet. As you can imagine, this would have been absolutely shocking for the disciples to see. Peter even says in verse 8, he says, Jesus, you will never wash my feet. For Jesus to wash Peter's feet, culturally, it meant that Jesus was lower than Peter. But Jesus, in the previous verse, in verse 7, he says, what I'm doing, you don't realise now, but afterwards you will understand. And yes, part of the answer is in verses 12 to 17, and Jesus is giving them an example of humble service. And we're going to come back to that. But there is something deeper going on here in this passage. In verse 1, we read that says Jesus knew that his hour had come. So in John's Gospel, whenever that is used, he is talking about Jesus on the cross. So Jesus knew that his hour had come. So this foot washing is not just a picture of love or being nice. It's actually the kind of love that Jesus would show at the cross. You see, at the basin, Jesus takes the place of a servant. While at the cross, Jesus takes the place of sinners. At the basin, Jesus stoops down to wash the dirty feet. And at the cross, Jesus gives the deeper cleansing we need, which is cleansing from our sin. Philippians 2 shows us beautifully how this comes about. Paul says that Jesus, though he existed in the form of God, did not treat equality with God to be something to be exploited to his own advantage. Instead, he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. John 13 shows us the posture of Jesus' love, while the cross shows us the depth of his love. At the basin, Jesus takes the form, he takes the place of a servant. At the cross, Jesus takes the place of sinners. So before Jesus calls us to wash one another's feet, he first shows us that he has served us. Jesus does not begin with the command to serve. He begins by serving them. The command to take up the towel and comes after the Saviour takes up his own towel. So after Jesus has washed his disciples' feet, he explains what this means for them. And this is where we come to our second point. What is the point of serving? Why serve? Why should we serve? In verse 12, we read that when Jesus had washed their feet, he put on his outer clothing, he reclined, and said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you?" The question is, do we understand what Jesus has done? Let's look at what Jesus says in verses 13 to 16. He says, "You call me teacher and Lord, and you are speaking rightly, since that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should also do just as I have done for you. Truly I tell you, a servant is not greater than his master, and a messenger is not greater than the one who sent him." So what is the point of serving? Is it about just getting jobs done? Is it just about feeling good about yourself? Is serving about trying to have a higher status, a social status, or people to look on you more favourably? Well, you could say, well, there are some benefits to serving. Like, jobs do need to get done, they certainly do. Studies have shown that when you serve others, there's a greater well-being, purpose and connection. And also other research have said that those who are generous and helpful are those who are looked more favourably in society. But for Christians, those are not our aim. That is not our aim. We do not serve so that people will think that we are impressive. We do not serve to build up our own reputation. We do not serve to make ourselves look extra spiritual. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, he says, "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God." So what is the job of an ambassador? How does serving and being ambassadors for Christ work together? Well, an ambassador, what they do is they don't represent themselves. So, for example, an Australian ambassador goes to the US, Japan, they represent Australia. They represent the king, they represent the prime minister, they represent another kingdom, they represent another message. So if we are ambassadors for Christ, then our lives are meant to point to what our king is like. And what kind of king do we see in John chapter 13? A king who gets down low, he takes a towel, and he washes the disciples' feet. Serving is not just about helping out. Serving is not just about feeling good about yourself. Serving is not just about building your own reputation or gaining a status. Serving is representing Jesus. When we serve with humility and love, we are saying to the world, this is what our King is like. This is what Jesus is like. And this is not just about those who we serve outside of the church. It begins with loving one another. A few verses later in chapter 13, verse 35, Jesus says, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So when we serve one another, when we carry each other's burdens, when we forgive, when we encourage, when we do the unseen jobs, When we love without grumbling, we are showing something of Jesus. And this is not just something we do in a church context, but also in our family. The way that we serve our husbands, the way that we serve our wives. What would it look like to serve one another in this context? What would that show to those around the world watching? And when we do serve those who do not yet know Christ, our service is so that it will point them to Christ. We serve because we want people to see Jesus. We serve because we want people to be reconciled to God. And that is our job as an ambassador, isn't it? Christ is making his appeal through us. But some of you might be saying, Josh, you know what? What about when I'm really tired? What if I'm really unwell? What if my body is really weak? What if my capacity is limited? How do I do it? Two things. The first one, in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 to 30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I am lowly, humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Christian service is not meant to be a guilt-driven thing that makes you exhausted. We do not serve to earn rest from Jesus. We serve from the rest that we have in Jesus. The same Jesus who takes up the towel to wash the disciples' feet is the same Jesus who says, "Come to me. Come to me, all you who are weary and are heavy laden." So for some of you right now, faithfulness may not mean adding extra things to your role. It may just mean coming to Jesus and resting in him. Your worth is not measured by how many jobs that you do. Your worth is found in Christ. And secondly, Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, he says, Now we have this treasure in clay jars, so that this extraordinary power may be from God and not from us." Jars of clay were ordinary, fragile, everyday containers. And Paul uses them as an example of us as humans, our human weakness. Because sometimes we can get so caught up in trying to make ourselves look impressive. We try to make this jar look so impressive that people skip what's in it, what's in the jar. We try to make this jar look so spectacular, but people end up looking at the jar instead of what's inside the jar. Archie Coates, a guy in London, he puts it this way: "We are the container, not the treasure." The point is not that people would be impressed with us, but that they would see the treasure, which is Christ. So as we finish this morning, and as we move into a time of communion, I want to end with this verse in verse 17. The story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And he says, "If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." This is a confronting verse, because it is possible to know John chapter 13. It is possible to admire John chapter 13. It's possible just to talk about John 13 and still not live John 13. My aim this morning is not to guilt-trip people into serving. It's not making it tired people feeling bad or trying to pressure you to do more. As I said, the same Jesus who takes up the towel to wash the disciples' feet is the same Jesus who says, "Come to me and I will give you rest." But Jesus does not call us to admire the towel from a distance. He calls us to take it up. So why do we serve? We serve because Christ first served us The Lord of glory took the lowest place at the basin. He took the place of a servant. At the cross, he took the place of sinners. We serve because we have been loved, cleansed, and served by him. And what is the point of serving? Why do we serve? The point is not that people would think that we are impressive. No. We are what? We are jars of clay. The treasure is Christ. What's inside? That's who we want people to see. Through our humility, our love, our weaknesses, our service, we want people to see something of Jesus. And when they see what's inside, they'll see Jesus. Not cookies, but Jesus. So church, let us not just be people who know these things. By the grace of God, let us be people